Well, here it is, folks. The first Super Tournament of the year, 2015, the 77th Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Great action, great tournament, great world-class players. Don't miss any of the action. Well, folks, here are the standings after round 5 in the 77th edition of Tata Steel Chess. This is the Masters section, and I'll tell you, it's up for grabs. First place, one of my favorite players and most interesting characters in chess, Vasily Ivanchuk from Ukraine, with 4 points, +3 out of 5 games. Great stuff. And in second place, the young gentleman from Poland, Wojtaszek, I believe it's pronounced, who has beaten Carlsen and Caruana. 3.5. Ding from China with 3.5. With 3 points, Caruana. So, the new addition to American chess, originally from the Philippines. Carlsen and Gary with 3. Rajabov and Vishela Graf with 2.5. Sark from Croatia with 2. Van Wheelie from the Netherlands. Aronian and Ho-Yi-Fan, current women's world champion, at 1.5. And poor Jobava with only 0.5 point out of 5 games. But he plays great chess. You can just tell when he's doing postmortems. He just loves the game. And I gotta tell you, old guys rule. Go Vasily, first place so far. And there you have it for standings through round 5 of the 77th Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Hi folks, John Cordisco back again. Round 5 of the 77th edition of Tata Steel Chess. One of my favorite tournaments. This is the Masters section. Between two individuals that need no introduction in the chess world. Magnus Carlsen, current world champion from Norway, as white. And Levin Aronian from Armenia, one of the top players in the world, was number 2 for years, as black. Let's get to it. It's going to be a Queen's Gambit decline. Carlsen is white, Aronian is black. Go through the opening here. D5. Bishop. C takes. Pawn takes. Bishop G5. H6. Bishop takes, Queen takes, Queen A4 check. Pretty standard stuff. It's got a tiny advantage for black, but this is just early in the game. Knight, of course, to block the check and protect the bishop on B4. E3. Castles. Bishop E2. Now the dark squared bishop is gone. Black's supposedly bad bishop. He finally develops his last minor piece, as does black. White castles, A6 for Aronian. Now, this is standard stuff. This is nothing really earth-shattering. We'll see how it goes from here. It's pretty boring, actually. We'll see how this works out. Here come the rooks, the only semi-open file on the board. Of course, the rook goes there. Bishop. Queen D1. Now it's interesting. Got my Fritz 13 computer on off screen, and I don't know if I'd like the queen to go back to D1. I'm not second guessing Carlsen. I'm sure he's still in preparation. Computer likes queen to C2, and I think that might be a little bit more useful, but he decided to bring it back. Who am I to question Magnus Carlsen? Knight. A3. I think it covers this B4 square very easily. Rook comes over. B4, trying to expand a little bit on the queen side. And knight to C8, that's interesting. I went over this game earlier and I can't figure that one out. Maybe he's trying to bring the knight here to here and eventually to here. I really don't know. Computer calls for knight to F5, and I like that. Bring more pieces on the king side with his double bishops there bearing down on the king side and the queen. That might have been the way to go. But Levin decided to go knight to C8 instead. Magnus goes knight to A4. Now B6. I think that's the only reason for that move is stopping the knight from coming here. But now what's this knight going to do? It's going to come back, waste the tempo. That's a shame for Aronian. Knight to B2. Knight goes back to E7. Knight comes up to the center of the board. That's a good spot for that knight. He wants to plant himself, or one of these knights wants to plant himself here. Knight to g6. Finally, that knight gets down the king side. Still a tiny advantage for black on the computer, but nothing to write home about. a4. It looks like he's trying to stir things up, or at least lock the pawns up maybe on the queen side for Magnus. a5 and b5. So that pretty much locks that side of the board in. This backward pawn isn't going to be much help for Aronian, and in a lot of ways this one's isolated, even though technically it's not. Rook to e8. Rook to c3. I think what Magnus wants to do is double up and go after this backward pawn. Bishop f5. Rook a to c1. He continues with his plan to double up. Rook a to d8. He figures that bishop for now can guard that backward c7 pawn. Knight to d2. Not so sure on that. Oh, by the way, there's going to be a small post-mortem with Magnus at the end, and Magnus had toyed with g3 or knight to d2. Those are the two top moves on the computer. They're both the same. Knight to d2 a hair's breadth better. He had toyed with g3. There's a couple things he didn't like about it, so he decided to go knight to e2, and he explains that. Not as good would have been rook takes, bishop takes, rook c8. A knight and a pawn for an exchange, but I don't think that really does him any good. Bishop to f5 for Aronian. Get that bishop in a place where it did a little bit more good. I think he was really doing much good guarding this pawn. In fact, he was here as kind of a large pawn, as they call it. Rook a to c1. Now he's after the c7 backward pawn, or a good place for his rook would be here. Rook. Knight to d2. Rook to d7. He's trying to guard that pawn the best he can. Maybe he'll try to transfer here, but that kind of hems in this bishop. But g3 finally gets that f4 square controlled. Knight to f8. Knight goes back to f8, and here we go with the retreating again. I don't know what Aronian was thinking, and he's a world-class player, don't get me wrong. Maybe he's just not doing well the last year or so. I mean, not badly, but for him, not as good as he usually does. And I'm not sure. Maybe his confidence is a little shaken. I'm not really sure. But he does retreat the knight. Queen to g5 looks like an excellent move. There's no dark squared bishop to harass the queen. And that puts it right in direct line with white's king. But he goes knight to f8. Where he's trying to bring the knight, I really don't know. Bishop to g4. Now, he should continue with his plan. Knight to e6, I think, is a viable move, where bishop takes g4, queen takes queen e6. But instead of putting the knight on e6, probably like he had planned, he puts it on h7. So he has the plan he's going to reroute that knight to here. Maybe he's looking at put him here or here. I really don't know. This seems too passive. Especially against Magnus. You're passive against Magnus, he will kill you. Bishop takes, queen takes. Queen f3. Now, as you'll see in the post-mortem with Magnus later, it's not the black's advantage to trade queens right now. Between this, for all intents and purposes, isolated pawn and this backward pawn, it's better to keep the queens on the board. Queen moves the queen, h4. And that's Magnus. He's coming after you. Queen to e7. Now he goes rook to c6. Let's go back here. It's a good square for that knight, or that rook, but I'm not sure what he's doing there, to be honest with you. But the computer calls for it. Now that dark squared bishop, isn't doing too well. Where's he going to go? He has absolutely nowhere to go. Yeah, he can go here, but not likely. The knight will just take, pawn takes, and that pawn's isolated. There's no way he can keep it on the board. So he goes knight to f6 instead. After that h4 move by Magnus, chased the queen, took that space away from the knight. Now Magnus comes up, and he's thinking about pushing. He wants to move that pawn to h5. That's his plan. Bishop to b4 now might be a good choice, being that the knight is gone from d3. But I think he makes a concession here. Bishop to a3, just to move the bishop to move, because you really don't want to move your pieces. He's almost in Zugzwang. He makes a really, really big concession, and he goes g6. Now, the computer jump, it's an over a point advantage now for white. Not overwhelming by any means, but that's a big concession, moving that pawn. And now he goes h5. Be honest with you, the computer liked h5 as well. King to f1 is the second move. After h5, king to g7. Pawn takes. And he drops his pawn. He has to lose it. It's basically, for all intents and purposes, isolated. Knight takes, queen takes, bishop takes. Now, I like that a lot. That's a good move. Bishop takes, and what will happen if pawn takes, queen checks, he picks up the knight. So basically they traded pawns. But it gives Magnus those pawns right down the center, which are really strong. Queen to g2, of course, for Carlsen. And Aronian's backed up. He's got to move the bishop, of course, or he'll lose it. Computer only shows a little less than a point advantage for white, but I think it's a lot easier to play. Looks like white's king's exposed, but it's really not. It's black's king that's going to have a problem. Knight to c4. Magnus is going to get that knight in. And this is where I think Aronian stumbles on move 36. I'm not really sure. I believe he was in time trouble. I think he had to do like 10 or 12 moves in 3.5 minutes. Queen to d8 is computer's choice. I mean, he's pretty much locked in here. He doesn't want to move anything. And nor can he. Queen to d8 is the computer's choice, or queen to h4. He goes rook to f8. And the points just jump. It's an over 2-point advantage now for white. And continues to climb. We all can see the move. Knight here. Now what should you do here? Bishop takes. He did, and it was a huge blunder. Huge blunder. You can see why he erred. Should have just left it. But he took it. If he went g5 instead, knight takes, queen takes. He's down the exchange. It still sucks for Aronian, but it's not nearly as bad as what's going to happen here. Queen takes, check. King to h8. Queen takes, check. King moves, and he takes the bishop. Queen takes. Now, white's up a pawn, but look at this position here. This rook is going to jump right in the action. It's just deadly for black. Rook checks. King f7. It's an 8-point advantage right now for white. Rook to c4. Here comes the other one. King to e7 is the computer's choice. Queen to h8. He went queen to a1 check. Queen to h8 might be the last chance for counterplay, because after check, king, rook, rook takes, king takes, queen checks, king e6, queen, king, rook. This is all computer suggestions. Queen takes. He has to take, of course, as his mate. and that's the end. Decided to go a1 instead. King comes up, and now the game's over. It's just a matter of time now and finding it. Rook checks. King e8. Rook e6. Excuse me. Rook e7. He has to take rook. And that's where 11 Aronian, world-class player from Armenia, resigns. To give you an idea what would have happened. It's a foregone conclusion. King has to go there. Rook checks. Queen has to take. I mean, what's he going to do? If he goes king to c8, he takes the rook mate. Well, mate coming shortly.